Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our chats with Emily as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are in the Johnson edition. We turned out a poem 686. They say that time assuages. Now, in many ways in this poem, we're back to poem 561. You guys will remember when we did this one. I measure every grief I meet with narrow, probing eyes. I wonder if it weighs like mine or has an easier size. I wonder if they bore it long, or did it just begin? I could not tell the date of mine, it feels so old a pain. I wonder if it hurts to live, and if they have to try, and whether could they choose between, it would not be to die. I note that some, gone patient long, at length renew their smile in imitation of a light that has so little oil. I wonder if when years have piled some thousands on the harm that hurt them early, such a lapse could give them any balm, or would they go on aching still through centuries of nerve, enlightened to a larger pain, in contrast with the love? The grieved are many, I am told. Notice they say, I am told. There is the various cause. Death is but one and comes but once and only nails the eyes. There's grief of want and grief of cold, a sort they call despair. Notice they call despair. There's banishment from native eyes in sight of native air. And though I may not guess the kind correctly, yet to me a piercing comfort it affords in passing Calvary, to note the fashions of the cross and how they're mostly worn, still fascinated to presume that some are like my own. Now, when this poem was first published by The Independent on the 21st of May, 1896, they actually called it, ironically, Time's Healing, which is, again, as we say, ironic, given what Emily's going to say about the fact that true pain and true suffering, it doesn't so easily go away. Now, our assumption is that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net. Down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily's our playlist. I'm hopeful that you will have already worked through our set of introductory comments, as well as the previous 685 poems. We just finished with 685, not Revelation. Now, if you've done that reading, then you'll recognize that Emily is often dealing with the question of our big five, the last of the big five, theodicy. Why must there be pain? Why must there be suffering? And to what degree do we ever actually get over it? In fact, the question that it seems Emily is often dealing with is time a great healer? And in some regards, Emily's going to challenge the cliche, if you will. Now, the scholar Priest has pointed out that Emily characteristically does not say what malady was teaching her this lesson at the time of writing the poem. But 3 years later, she quoted the second stanza in a letter number 319, to Thomas Higginson, to show him that she was still suffering from the death of her dog Carlo 6 months after it had happened. And one other scholar has pointed out that when Dickinson lost her only playmate, her dog Carlo, Higginson expressed sympathy, so as she wrote back in letter 319 saying, quote, "Thank you, I wish for Carlo," and then continuing with the second stanza of, "They say that time assuages," but she added still in this letter, "I have the hill, my Gibraltar remnant, nature seems it to myself, plays without a friend," end quote. She never acquired another dog, Emily did not. It is astonishing, the scholar finishes, that the editor of The Independent, in which this uncompromising poem posthumously appeared, dared to entitle it Time's Healing, end quote. Now, Emily will often not explain what the cause of the suffering is, just talk about the malady or the pain. One scholar has called this the crisp and truthful Emily, that researches the whole notion of suffering and pain. Let's see what Emily has to say. They say that time assuages. Time never did assuage, and actual suffering strengthens as sinews do with age. Time is a test of trouble, but not a remedy. If such it proved too there was no malady. In a shortened version, in other words, if you can get over it, then it probably wasn't true suffering. Emily is always dealing with this. If you notice this, where she's always asking, Is it real pain? Is it real suffering? And to what degree do we appreciate or understand real suffering? Notice we begin with the they. And it again takes us back to that reading of 561. Who is the they? Well, it's a cliche, as they say. And again, they say will take us to our reason, one more reason to call our series Chats with Emily, right? Time assuages, of course. You notice the capital, or the quotation marks around it with the capital of time. Time assuages. Now, Emily would know from her own dictionary study that assuages has its Latin root in the idea of sweet. In other words, time makes sweet that which is sour. But notice she'll say it right out loud, confidently. Time never did assuage. An actual suffering strengthens, as sinews do. When we get to poem 1113, we'll come back to this idea of sinews, and this is the way she'll play the game there. There is a strength in proving that it can be borne, although it tear. What are the sinews of such cordage for except to bear the ship might be of satin, had it not to fight, to walk on seas requires cedar feet. By the way, this use of the word suffering will remind us of 405 and 536, our study there. And when we get to 792, she'll play this game again with the idea of suffering. One of the great poets, of course, of suffering. Through the straight pass of suffering, the martyrs even trod, their feet upon temptation, their faces upon God. A stately shriven company, convulsion playing round, harmless as streaks of meteor upon a planet's bond. Their faith, the everlasting troth, their expectation fair, the needle to the north decree, waged so through polar air. And when we get to 799, just a few poems later, clearly Emily was still dealing with this question of suffering. Despair's advantage is achieved by suffering. Despair, to be assisted of reverse, one must reverse have borne. The worthiness of suffering, like the worthiness of death, is ascertained by tasting, as can no other mouth. Of savors make us conscious, as did ourselves partake. Affliction feels impalpable until ourselves are stopped. And then finally in 957, we'll see again her use of this word suffering. Suffering strengthens us, as sinews do with age. Now, of course, some have pointed out that the word assuages has the word age in it. It's interesting that Emily is playing the game. Is it true, though, we could ask, that as one gets older, one gets stronger and the sinews get stronger? She says, that's the interesting thing about pain and suffering. True pain and suffering, it just seems to get stronger in the mind as time goes on. And then notice our repetition of the T's here. Time is a test of trouble, right? In other words, you really want to know if you got serious pain or suffering or trouble, a malady, then let's find out about time. But time is no remedy. She comes back, time never did assuage. If such it prove, in other words, if you ultimately forget about the pain of the suffering, it proved too there was no malady. Now when we hit poem 786, we'll come back to this use of the word malady. At the very end, I'll just jump to the last part of the poem. No drug for consciousness can be alternative to die, is nature's only pharmacy for being's malady. The only other time that she uses this word malady. Now, some have argued this poem is really referencing the rejection maybe Emily feels from Sam Boyles, the Springfield Republican editor, that did not want to promote, it seems, much of Emily's poetry. By the way, when we get to 1261 later in our study, we'll come back to this poem. A word dropped careless on a page may stimulate an eye when folded in perpetual seam, the wrinkled maker lie. Infection in the sentence breeds. We may inhale despair at distances of centuries from the malaria. True pain, true malady, true suffering. Well, what are we going to say about it at 2a? Age can't be assuaged any more than death, right? As one scholar has said it. True suffering is never forgotten, actually. At 2b, the tone of this poem is fascinating. It seems Emily's pretty certain in this poem, different from other poems where she's not always so certain that, no, you can't forget it. And then at 3a, to relate to this, the scholar Priest has pointed out that Lawrence Whistler's description of his wife Jill in his memoir, The Initials in the Heart, is reminiscent of Emily's attitude. He writes, quote, strong opinions she had, and expressed them with zeal, but as like as not would break off with, well, I don't know, having instantly seen how an opposite case could be argued, her mind was open, end quote. Now, of course, we can think of our study of all of the great epic poems, especially Dante's Divine Commedia, right? What is the argument for Dante? Not that we go to hell, but rather what we go through hell. And that requires a certain kind of courage. Finally, in 3b, do you agree that true suffering is never forgotten? And that's what makes it true suffering. Thank you.